All right, welcome back to the Wednesday live stream. If you're new here, this is Right Response Ministries. I'm the primary host, Pastor Joel Webbin. I've got with me today, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Central Time, we live stream once a week on Wednesdays. I've got Wesley Todd. I also have Michael Belch. They're both members in good standing. We're in Georgetown, Texas, Covenant Bible Church. And we do this every single Wednesday at 4 p.m. And we had an episode that was lined up for today, but we're deciding to go ahead and push that back because there's big breaking news that's going on right now. The news is that our governor in the state of Texas, Governor Abbott, who has, he's fairly conservative. He's certainly one of the better governors in the nation as a whole. But to be honest, in many instances, he's kind of his best moves have been following suit of guys like Ron DeSantis in Florida. So somebody else will take a stand and then he'll follow, their example. He hasn't really been an original leader, coming out with a strong conservative stance all on his own. But this is his battle. We have had a full-blown invasion. That is the proper term for a long time. I mean, immigration has gone up. Illegal immigration and legal immigration has gone up steadily for the past few years, even before Biden taking office. But since the Biden administration over these past 3 years, I believe it's 6 million that we've had crossing the southern border. I believe just the border of Texas is what Governor Abbott said. 6 million, and these are not just women with their toddlers and babies. A predominant amount of them. There are some women, there are some children. I'm not saying there's nothing, but the dominant amount of people who are crossing the border are military-aged, fighting young men. And instead of carrying an AR, they're carrying, a cell phone, videoing it as they're flying their national flag, which is today's warfare. It's a media warfare. It's a warfare of politics to destroy our nation. And so what we're going to be talking about, we're going to show Abbott's letter. We're going to read it for you guys. But the reason why it's a big deal is because the Supreme Court just ruled, and I'm going to say this, and some of you won't like it, but it matters because I think one of the things that we have to stand as Christians, we have to stand for right now is the importance of nature, that grace does not eradicate nature. It doesn't erase nature or replace nature, but it elevates and restores nature. Natural affections matter. These things are ingrained in us. It's not a part of the curse. We actually misprioritize some natural affections because of the curse of sin. Natural affections, that was in a pre-lapsarian world before sin entered the world. Adam would have had a greater devotion to his wife, Eve, than he would have his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter. That's natural. And so it's not a coincidence that the Supreme Court just ruled. I believe this was yesterday. They're ruling? Monday. So the Supreme Court just ruled in a 5-4 majority. You've got the usual suspects. You've got Roberts, and you've got 3 other women, Ketanji Brown Jackson being one of them. But then one surprise was a 4th woman on the court. So you have 5 women, one of both sexes. So one effeminate man, and then 4 women. But the surprise was that, Amy Coney Barrett was a Trump appointee. She has governed and ruled. Not governed, but ruled conservatively for the most part, which is awesome. But on this one, she folded. And I just have to say, with this nature paradigm, grace and nature, I think we are being naive as Christians if we think it's merely a coincidence that a woman folded, the conservative woman folded, and it happens to be a woman who has several children, and multiple of them are adopted. Yep. Adoption is great. Just for the record, I was adopted. I'm a big fan of adoption. I think adoption is a beautiful picture of the gospel. That's what God does with us. Spiritually, he takes those of us who were once children of his wrath and actually children of the devil. That's John chapter 8, right? That if you're not a Christian, then you are actually, you have a father, but you're a child of the devil. That's what Jesus says to the Pharisees. So God takes someone else's children, in this case, namely the devil's, and makes them his own and adopts us as his beloved children. We're no longer his enemies or children of his wrath or children of Satan, but we become beloved children of God. Adoption is it's near to the heart of God. It's a picture of the gospel. It's wonderful. And I've been adopted twice, once by God in the spiritual sense and once by my parents who are members in our church. You guys know, love my mom and dad. I was adopted as a baby. We are pro-adoption. That said, there are cases. You may have remembered, for those of you in the Reformed world, Eric Kahn, who tends to upset the masses, a couple months ago on Twitter. I think of him as like Vlad the Impaler, the Impaler. So that's kind of his strategy on Twitter. He sent out this tweet about saying, hey, not everyone should adopt. And adoption has been like a sacred cow. It's been like a mark of how do you know this person is spiritually legit? because they've adopted a bunch of children, and it's like a weird mystical badge of honor and status within the church. This person's very spiritual. They're very good. And he just tweeted out saying adoption is wonderful. There's nothing wrong with it. But there are cases, for instance, adopting out of the foster care system, which is a wonderful thing to do. But if you're adopting a 13-year-old boy out of the foster care system who's been in it his whole life, and you currently have 3 young girls under the age of 6, that there may be real reasons not to do that. And he wasn't saying don't love your adopted child. He was saying no. He's talking about the child who is a prospect for adoption. They're not yet your child. This child is not yet your child. And the point is, the internet, and I'm talking about Christians, lost their mind. Christians were like, how could you? How dare you? This is evil. You are sinister. You're a bad man. Well, here you go. This is Eric Kahn's point. Giving him some props. Eric Kahn's point now played out in real life. 5-4 decision with the Supreme Court, barely a majority. A conservative, otherwise normally conservative, female Supreme Court justice votes for what? What does she vote for? She votes for the stranger, the alien, the foreigner, because she's thinking like a mother and an adoptive mother. So she's thinking in the framework of nurturing, the way that women were designed by God. It's a wonderful thing. I just don't think you should be on the Supreme Court. And not because I'm talking about, in this case, women, period, not mothers, women who happen to be mothers of adopted children. I do believe that is a position in the civil magistrate that should be held by qualified men. But you have a woman who her gear is towards being nurturing. If anything, she's more nurturing than Ketanji Brown Jackson by virtue of being a conservative mother, and not just a mother, but she actually has adopted children. Children who were not her own, but who are now. The adoption makes them legally her children, and biblically, spiritually, they are her children. But then the fact that woman on this issue sides with other nations that are not actually her native nation. It's not the children of America, but the children of the foreigner. That is not a coincidence. And so that's what happens. And Governor Abbott, I'll be honest, I am surprised, albeit pleasantly surprised, but I didn't think he would battle this. You've got the Federal National Guard versus the Texas National Guard. They came in and said, Texas, you've got to remove the razor wire that you're wrapping around the necks of 2-year-olds, and which is just absolute. It's barbed wire that's in the river, that's visible to deter people, not to hurt people, but to say, don't do this. If you do this, you're hurting yourself. We are not hurting you. You are hurting yourself. It is to deter people from breaking the law, from illegally entering into the country. But you have Biden sent in his goons to slice the wire, remove it, and Governor Abbott is now using the Texas National Guard in defiance of the Supreme Court and our current presidential administration, saying, no, this is a constitutional issue. You have declared treason of sorts on the United States of America and certainly on the state of Texas, because this is an invasion level crossing that's going on with military-aged men. It's endangering our citizens. And so he's taking a stand and he's going to hold them off. We'll see. I hope, I pray, but hold off the federal goons, and the Texas National Guard is putting the wire back in. And if Biden stands his ground, which he probably won't, because it's an election year, and like 80% of the country, even if you're Democrat, 80% of the country is like, okay, the border's a problem. The border is right up there with the economy in the polls in terms of what people think is most under fire, most severe, the biggest urgent problem. And so Biden may not take a stand for electing purposes, but if he does, this does have the seeds. I'm not saying this is it, but this has the seeds for your classic Texas succession that everybody's been talking, or Civil War, those kinds of things. So with all that being said, we'll talk about it more. We'll talk about nature, natural affections. We'll talk about the civil and political aspects and the potential of civil war, all those kinds of things, or state succession. But first, let's read the letter. Michael, could you do the honors?
All right. This is the letter that Governor Abbott posted in response to the Supreme Court decision. And to be fair, the Supreme Court decision was a temporary one. The whole case is being heard. This was specifically on cutting down the razor wire, right? So there's a whole lot more that's even going to be coming down the pike, potentially. Here's the letter. The federal government has broken the compact between the United States and the states. The executive branch of the United States has a constitutional duty to enforce federal laws protecting states, including immigration laws on the books right now. President Biden has refused to enforce those laws and has even violated them. The result is that he has smashed records for illegal immigration. Despite having been put on notice in a series of letters, one of which I delivered to him by hand, President Biden has ignored Texas's demand that he perform his constitutional duties. President Biden has violated his oath to faithfully execute immigration laws enacted by Congress. Instead of prosecuting immigrants for the federal crime of illegal entry, President Biden has sent his lawyers into federal courts to sue Texas for taking action to secure the border. President Biden has instructed his agencies to ignore federal statutes that mandate the detention of illegal immigrants. The effect is to illegally allow their en masse parole in the United States. By wasting taxpayer dollars to tear open Texas's border security infrastructure, President Biden has enticed illegal immigrants away from the 28 legal entry points along this state's southern border, bridges where nobody drowns, and into the dangerous waters of the Rio Grande. Under President Biden's lawless border policies, more than 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years. This is more than the population of 33 different states in this country. This illegal refusal to protect the states has influenced unprecedented harm on the people all across the United States. James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and the other visionaries who wrote the U.S. Constitution foresaw that states should not be left to the mercy of a lawless president who does nothing to stop external threats like cartels smuggling millions of illegal immigrants across the border. That is why the framers included both Article 5, Section 4, which promises that the federal government, quote, shall protect each state against invasion, end quote, and Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, which acknowledges, quote, the state's sovereign interest in protecting their borders. Arizona of the United States, you can see the ruling there. The failure of the Biden administration to fulfill the duties imposed by Article 4, Section 4 has triggered Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, which reserves to this state the right of self-defense. For these reasons, I have already declared an invasion under Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 to invoke Texas's constitutional authority to defend and protect itself. That authority is the supreme law of the land and supersedes any federal statutes to the contrary. The Texas National Guard, the Texas Department of Public Safety, and other Texas personnel are acting on that authority, as well as the state law, to secure the Texas border. Signed, Governor Abbott. Talk about the lesser magistrate.
Yeah, that's the doctrine of the lesser magistrate, going through the right channels and using God's law first and foremost, but also the Constitution and state Constitution, federal Constitution, and standing up to treason. I mean, it's absolute. Joe Biden is a traitor of the United States and what he's been doing with the border. Wes.
Yeah, you mentioned it. It was in the letter. 6 million illegal immigrants, greater than the population of 33 states. The reason this matters so much, the reason you mentioned it's such a high issue, there comes a point with immigration where you actually don't have a country anymore, where literally the fate has already, it's been decided, where there's a certain point where your own replacement level, so Americans, that replacement, fertility, how many kids on average, where when there's so many people that don't have allegiance to this country, some of them even unregistered, whatever it may be, where literally you could reach the tipping point and then pretty much the story is written in the stars. There's no going back from it. There's no like, oh, we actually, we would like to walk back from this cliff we walked up to the edge of.
Yeah.
You don't get that. We're talking about not just, I don't think in 50 years or 70 years, we could reach the point where we don't have a nation anymore. In under 5 years, we could reach the point where it's lost. And that's not to say like, oh, these poor dispossessed people, they have a nation too,
right?
That they could have allegiance to.
That's right.
They could work to perfect, to work to build up. But they're coming into ours, and the result is none of us have a nation. Then they don't have a nation or allegiance. Ours is lost, and everyone is worse for the wear.
Right, and for the record, in terms of asylum, claims of seeking asylum, if you're going through 14 other nations
right.
on your way to seek asylum, then you're not seeking asylum. What you're seeking is you're seeking prosperity, and there is a difference, and that's fine. I understand that everybody would like to be prosperous, but if you'd like to be prosperous, then you have to go through the proper channels. You need to be a legal immigrant, not an illegal immigrant. So if you're coming from a war-torn nation and you're passing through 7 other nations on the way that may not be the United States of America, they may not have the opportunity for prosperity that we do here. Praise God by His grace, but they're not at war. Then you're going through peaceful, not prosperous, but peaceful nations on the way. Then you're not seeking asylum. What you're seeking is to invade a country, and better magistrates and a better country wouldn't allow it. Unfortunately, we don't have a good country. You think of like Benjamin Franklin. What did you achieve? What'd you give us? I gave you a republic if you can keep it, and we've proven that unfortunately we can't. And so in terms of what angle, what incentive Joe Biden and Democrats for the most part have when it comes to immigrants, Democrats cannot win an election apart from immigrants. And so Democrats, I'm just going to speak frankly here, Democrats win elections through immigrants, also women voting, and also, if they could, they would lower the age of voting, making marijuana legal. So you have guys, who are high going into voting booths at every single level. They want a population that's mostly women voting and not men. The men who are voting, they want them to have low testosterone levels. They want them to be sickly and dying and high. And then they want illegal immigrants to be able to vote. And you might say, well, illegal immigrants in the country isn't the same as voting. Well, it effectively becomes the same when you have individual cities like New York City and other places saying that that you don't have to provide any documentation, and then outright even saying we're going to let people who are not citizens vote in national elections. And so that's the direction. Basically, anybody who has a vested interest in the nation, a tax-paying national citizen, clear thinking, somebody who loves America, they don't vote for Democrats. They don't. Right. They don't.
I have an analogy of this to help us understand a little bit. Imagine that there's a father and a mother who are divorced, okay, and the mother has primary custody of the kids, and she's doing her best. She has them on a strict schedule, bedtime, eat your vegetables, things like this, right? Now, when the kids go see the father buys them ice cream and McDonald's and, lets them stay up as late as they want, play video games all night, etc. It's not just what you're saying, Joel, that the Democrats need these votes. It's that they also have to lie about what is loving to these people. They say, we are going to give you all of this stuff. We are going to ensure that you get money. I mean, we're talking $3,000 ATM cards when they cross the border and a cell phone. And I just saw today that there is talking that the UN is going to be donating $1.5 billion to fund immigrants, illegal immigrants who cross the U.S. southern border.
Wow.
And so the Democrats have to play like they're this father who's giving everything when really it's bad. It's bad for the people just to be given unlimited, access to healthcare, scholarships, housing without having to work for it. And it's bad for the rest of the country. And then what they do is they say, well, mom is really the bad guy. Right. Mm-hmm. Mom is really the bad guy because she makes you go to bed. And the next time we get a custody hearing, kids, make sure you tell the judge who you want to have more custody. It's me. I'm the fun guy. She's the bad guy. She's the meanie.
Right. That dichotomy between tough love is a good word for it. Like it's not enjoyable to do this, but it's better for you. So it's not as though we could love immigrants or we couldn't. By loving, quote unquote, which really isn't loving, you're actually not loving your own people. So you're not loving your own people by letting in gang members that will spread drugs and violence. I know not all of them will do that. You're not loving your people by subverting their workforce, or the people that have lived in this nation, that pay their taxes, can't have jobs. That's not loving to your people. So it's not as though I could love or I couldn't. After all, love is a good thing, and we want to be kind and welcoming. Yeah. By so doing, you will hate your own people. And you just got to get to a second level of thinking. Like, okay, on the surface, well, that is a good thing to be welcoming. Hospitality is a real virtue. For the right people, the safe people in the right place in the right time, not spread broadly. But you got to get to the second level and say, who am I not loving by doing this?
Let me expand on that for a minute, because I was just talking to someone, I'm not going to say who, but I was talking to someone just within the last week who's in the construction area and who knows a little bit about construction here in Texas. We're in Texas. And he said that he's come to find out recently that there are whole groups and organizations of construction companies who will send representatives down to Honduras, Guatemala, these places, and they'll go down there and they'll just start talking to men, able-bodied men, and saying, look, I'll take you back to the States, and they'll tell them the dollar amount that they'll pay them per hour, which sounds like a fortune in Guatemala or Honduras, but which is barely livable here. So they say, okay, I can get you there. I can get you working. It's going to be a coyote to get you across the border would be $10,000. I will do it for $12,000, but you can pay it in installments once you start working. And this is actually happening where they're bringing across dozens and dozens and hundreds of able-bodied men promising what sounds like a fortune. When they get here, they realize with the cost of living in the States, that's actually not going to go very far. Right. So now they're enslaved to this debt that they have to pay off, and they can't afford to live anywhere. So they're literally putting 20 guys in one apartment building for them to live. And they go out and they work. They make their next to nothing wage. They go back. They live in this apartment. They have years, months and months and years of paying off this debt. That is not loving. Although a liberal would say it's loving to let an immigrant come across and
I'm sure they would love
partake.
them as their neighbor. I would hope that group moves in right next door to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, they live in gated communities.
Let me get to a couple of the comments real quick. So if you guys have questions or something like that, put it in the comments. We'll try to address it today. This is from 2 minutes to midnight. They say the church is doing this also. I thought this was a good point. Good job, 2 minutes to midnight. The church is doing this also. We are not serving the needy in the church and rather throwing money and time at unbelievers. That's the same principle, right? So that we have clear verses where the Apostle Paul in Galatians, for instance, I believe it's chapter 6, it might be chapter 5, but what he says is, as often as you have opportunity, do good to all, but especially the household of faith, aka he's saying, especially meaning, but prioritize the household of faith. Here's the deal. Jesus is God and therefore infinite, and he is the head of the church. But the church on earth, Christ's body, his hands and feet, the church is finite. It's made up of people, and people have a limited amount of gifts and time and resources and money and all those kinds of things. So the church is not infinite in its resources, which means as often as we, the church, the people of God, have opportunity, we should seek to do good to all people. But we have a mandate in Scripture to prioritize the household of faith. So if we're doing good to the unbeliever at the cost of our brother or sister in Christ, then we've messed up. If we're doing good to even another local church on the other side of the world filled with brothers and sisters in Christ, but at the cost of our local church, brothers and sisters in Christ at home, then we've messed up. Another passage would be Jesus, and this is always used out of context, and I absolutely hate it. So we got to do a little Christian Bible Mythbusters here. But it's the verse, the passage where Jesus says, whatever you've done for the least of these, you've done for me. Well, you know, if you've clothed someone, if you fed someone when they were in prison, you visited them. You brought them water when they were thirsty. You know, all those kinds of things. And then, you know, and you know, on the last day, I'll separate, you know, from the sheep on the right and the goats on the left. And I will say, you did this for me. And they will say to me, you will say to me, when did we do this? When did we see you, Jesus, naked and clothe you? And when did we see you hungry and feed you? When did we see you thirsty and give you something to drink? And Jesus says, he says, I tell you the truth, whatever you've done for the least of these, you've done for me. Now, that's the Mythbuster right there. I left out one important phrase. So people then, they'll go, so this is your libtard Christians in America, libtard evangelicals, the usual suspects, your David Frenches, your Russell Moores, your Beth Moore, your, you know, any Moore will do. They're basically, there's very little difference from Michael Moore and Beth Moore and Russell Moore at this point. So, but what they'll do is they'll say, oh, whatever you do for the least of these. Well, who are the least of these? Oh, the people in our society who are the least of these are those on the margins. And so it's people who are poor, or it's people of the LGBT community, or it's the illegal immigrant. I remember Stephen Colbert, this was years ago, but doing the same thing, quoting this passage as a, you know, professed Christian, a Catholic, and saying, you know, I look at the least of these, and then he cited, he said, I don't know anybody who's more the least of these than immigrants. And he cited immigrants. Well, here's what Jesus actually says. Whatever you do, right? When did we clothe you, Jesus? When did we feed you? Whenever you did it for the least of these, my brothers, you did it for me. That's what's actually in the text. So Jesus, and it goes that goes perfectly in cross-referencing a whole biblical theology with other texts. Whoever receives a prophet in my name receives a prophet's reward. Whoever receives this in my name, an evangelist receives that reward. The point is this: Jesus says, "Whatever you do for the least of these, my brothers." You visit someone in prison because they're an unbelieving atheistic child molester. No, that's not what Jesus is saying. He's saying, when he says you visited me in prison, what Jesus has in mind is that you visited a Christian who's been wrongfully imprisoned for preaching the gospel of Jesus. Yeah. When you've clothed the naked, what Jesus has in mind is a brother or sister in Christ who is impoverished and can't afford clothing, or someone who has had their possessions robbed in persecution for their Christian faith, and then another Christian who has not been persecuted comes to their aid and helps Team Jesus. It's my brothers. So as often as you have opportunity, do good to all, going back to Galatians, the Apostle Paul, but especially that is prioritized as a first priority, the household of faith, and that clause of as often as you have opportunity. Well, here's the bottom line. It's time to wake up, Peter Pan. We can't forgive everybody's student debt. We can't feed everyone and give them all a free lunch. We can't let everyone into our country. As often as you have opportunity, what you should read in there as just a common sense, brain functioning individual person, whether you're even a Christian or not, is opportunity in this life with finite people is always limited. Of course it's limited. Right. We only have so much opportunity. Now, there are plenty of arguments that can be made to say, well, but don't you maybe have more opportunity? Couldn't you be content to live on less? Sure. So I'm not saying that greed doesn't factor in. I'm not saying that gauging our opportunity as Western Christians can't be skewed. How much opportunity we have to give to others can't be skewed by our idolatry of pleasure or comfort or greed. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm just saying the facts are, even if you remove every ounce of greed, eventually, I only have so many dollars in my bank account right now. I only can fit so many people in my house and give them a place to sleep. I only have so much food in my refrigerator. And as it pertains to an individual or a household, so it is with a nation. Yep. And so to say, listen, we want to protect our borders because we have a responsibility to our people. As often as we have opportunity, we'll try do our best to love all people, but especially our people. When you start loving someone else's kids, if I clothe every kid in my neighborhood, but I don't buy clothes for my kids, not only is that wrong or a misprioritization, the Bible has strong words for that. The Apostle Paul says that you've denied the faith. If a man won't provide for his own house, the members of his own house, he's worse than an unbeliever. He has denied the faith. And so too, I believe that the general equity of that command applied to the civil magistrate who is called to be, within the Reformed tradition and the ancient church fathers, called to be a nurturing father to his people, the citizens underneath his rule. If he is helping others, but to the cost of fulfilling his own duty to clothe and provide and help his own people, his own citizens, then he is worse than an unbeliever, and he has denied the faith. And I mean, obviously, we know that that Joe Biden is not a believer unless God works a miracle and saves him. Some of the most tormenting places in hell are reserved for that man. He is a terrible, terrible man. But there are far worse men who are pulling the strings and using him as a puppet. But the point is this: there's plenty of evidences. You can watch the new documentary that came out about Joe Biden's parenting. It's called Beekeeper. It's a documentary about Hunter Biden, being the president, having a son that's a complete drug. I'm being facetious, but it might as well have been a documentary. It's literally the whole premise. I hate, spoiler alert here, but the whole premise is you got a woman president. So there you go, Joe Biden. And then you've got her son is just this deadbeat. He's stealing from people. He's a drug addict and doing drugs, in the White House and all these kinds of things. And I literally thought, man, this is on the nose. But anyways, all that being said, the point is, if you didn't have all the other evidence of Joe Biden being pro-abortion, being this, being that, and the other, one evidence that he is not a Christian and that he should be removed from office is that he is not a nurturing father. He is worse than an unbeliever. He has denied the faith that he personally professes by caring for the children of the world over the citizens that he has been entrusted to guard. Any other thoughts? If not, we're probably going to need to go to a commercial here in a moment. But
you said it well one time a while ago in a sermon, but the church is given to a mission of mercy, not justice, and the state is given to a mission of justice, not mercy. So like we read, for example, the Sermon on the Mount, there's many good virtues in it. Blessed are the peacekeeper, blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful. Those aren't categories to be applied one-to-one to the civil state. You wouldn't want a police officer that showed up after your home was robbed and said, well, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. We have to think in categories and what categories God has given to these different, you could say spheres, you could say institutions. So when you think of the state, don't start thinking of the Sermon on the Mount. Don't start thinking of personal ethics. Think of Romans 13, where it directly says that the state has been given to protect, to wield a sword, to punish the wicked, to promote righteousness. Just even an example, it's an interesting one, but in World War I, the U.S. used to have really strict immigration control. There were strict quotas on how many people could come in, from what countries, a good vetting system. Because of World War I, they allowed unchecked immigration from the island of Sicily out near Italy. And what actually came over, so all the mob bosses that eventually brought about the mafia, which for decades plagued the American public with drugs and with violence and all these different things, that came about because they imported the problems of another nation. They got sympathetic. Oh man, these poor, 30-year-old able-bodied fighting men, they just need a place to retreat to. And those men swooped in, evil men, came in, set up crime scenes, set up crime bosses, set up systems and networks that, cost billions of dollars, cost thousands of lives, and unleashed violence upon the American populace. What if...
And got us the FBI.
Which might have been even worse, actually, all things considered. What if everyone, you're in Sicily, how about you fight for Sicily? You're in America, fight for America. If you are in Mexico, and I can have sympathy for the Christian father that says, my country is overrun by cartels. My country is overrun by violent men. Well, the Puritans and those who first settled this nation, they didn't have a great place to go. They had to fight and they had to die and they had to through strength, muster up the will to be a people. And if every country on their own, the Christians and non-Christians alike, mustered up that strength and will for themselves, we wouldn't have these problems. You have to fight for Mexico. You have to fight for Sicily. These nations are not going away. There's not new ones coming up. The line has to be drawn. And if you're a citizen, you were born there, have some love for your country, fight for it. Each country fights for itself.
Amen. All right, this is what I want to do. Let's go to a commercial, and then we'll say a couple more words that I think will be helpful and important for you guys to hear. But let's go to a brief word from our first sponsors of the day. Did you know that fresh American black elderberries are naturally high in vitamin C, vitamin B6, phosphorus, and vitamin A, as well as many anthocyanins that serve as antioxidants? Regular supplementation with elderberry extracts has been shown to decrease chance of influenza and lessen cold duration and symptoms. The Kings Ridge fresh frozen elderberries are hand-picked, destemmed, washed, and quickly frozen at their family farm in East Central Indiana. The Kings Ridge is a quality-oriented family farm focused on building Christendom. Our friends Trevor and Autumn truly hope that their elderberry syrup and fresh frozen elderberries bless your family this cold and flu season. Don't buy dried European elderberries and support the global economic agenda. Instead, visit tkrfarm.com and purchase your elderberry needs from the Kings Ridge elderberries. Again, that's tkrfarm.com. Finally, a coffee company that doesn't hate you and your beliefs. Today's sponsor, Squirrely Joe's Coffee, is a thoroughly Christian company that ships seriously good coffee straight to your front door. Owned and operated by Joe Morris and his family out of Olney, Illinois. They believe that Christians should be building a thoroughly Christian economy by doing business with other like-minded Christians. Just go to squirrelyjoes.com and use promo code RRM for 20% off your purchase. Squirrely Joe's Coffee, share coffee, serve humbly, live faithfully.
All right, well, welcome back. So just to recap, Governor Greg Abbott today, the governor of Texas, has declared an invasion at the border of Texas. He has told the federal government that he will be securing the border, that agents that supposedly are allowed to come in and cut the wire and let unchecked illegal immigration in, that they're not allowed to. He's activated the Texas National Guard, declared an invasion, and it looks to be going to take a stand at the border, take a stand for his citizens, for those that he has a sovereign duty to protect. And so all that to say, God bless Governor Abbott. And it's funny, he's in a wheelchair, but he has stood up more than so many other leaders
Yep,
have.
the guy in the wheelchair is standing much taller than the decrepit meat bag in the White House.
Yep.
So, Michael, do you have a final thought?
My final thought is simply this. We really are in a situation where the doctrine of the lesser magistrate applies, because we're not calling for vigilantes. We're not calling for some sort of just, I'm angry, I'm going to, take out my anger publicly. There is now a magistrate of the state of Texas who is doing his godly duty, and it is not only good, but it's necessary for citizens of Texas, which we are in, to submit to that, to come under that umbrella. That is good and godly. That is within the order that God has designed and ordained. And so when Christians and evangelicals and non-Christians come out and say, this is, anyone who's supporting Abbott, this is insurrection, and no, this is not. This is how God designed authority structures to work. And
Amen.
If you are in a state that is not in this situation right now, it's perfectly appropriate to call on your leaders to act in godly ways so that you can then come under their good and godly leadership as well. So,
Amen. So let's go ahead and land the plane for this episode. For those of you who are watching, thanks for tuning in. We do this every single Wednesday at 4 p.m. And this isn't even the live stream that we had prepared, because this was news that dropped just a few hours ago today. So we pulled an audible and we went for it because we wanted to get it to you as urgently as possible, talk about something that's fresh, that's happening right now. So we're actually going to do 2 live streams. As soon as we close this video, we're going to start our live stream for today. Real quick, Wes, plug it. What are we talking about?
We're talking about low T pastors, low testosterone. We're talking about Alistair Begg and how this factors
No
into
relation.
No
Low-T
relation.
pastors, that's one topic, and then a completely separate topic.
on that
Beck.
topic, and the rise of Donald Trump.
The
They're
rise
all
of Donald Trump.
interconnected.
Yep. And we're going to be talking about Sean Strickland as a great godly example. I'm just kidding. He's not a great godly example, but we are going to talk about the phenomenon of guys like him who are saying, no. I'm just not going to play your game. I'm not going to play the woke game. I'm not going to pander to all the the leftists with their cry bully tactics, right? Used to, a bully on the playground was big. You actually had strength. Now it's whoever can cry the best. I remember my dad teaching me that when I was a young teenager. I remember I made a girl cry, and in this particular instance, it was not my habit to go around making girls cry, but in this particular instance, it was something that happened in the youth group. She was absolutely in the wrong, and all I did, I didn't touch her. God forbid, I would never do anything like that, but with words and carefully spoken, as careful as as a young teenager could, teenage boy. But I said, this is wrong. You can't do that. What you're doing is da-da, 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 da-da. That's what you're actually saying. That's what your actions are portraying, and that's wrong. And she cried and went and told some of the adults in the church, and the adults, sat me down, the school marms, and started to try to longhouse me. And my dad, who was the pastor of the church, he stepped in and stopped them, and then he talked and said, no, my son's right. And he didn't just get my back because I'm his son. There's plenty of times that he was like, no, my son's wrong. But, he got my back, and he shut down the school marms in the longhouse. And then he told me privately, I remember, he said, Joel, a lesson that you need to learn, we live in a world that hates men. And this was over 20 years ago. He said, and a woman crying is it's like a nuclear bomb. You cannot stop it. If she cries, she wins. He said, I know that's wrong. I know that's unjust, but you need to be aware of that. Right now, you're a teenage boy. You'll get through it. But when you're a grown man, if you make women cry, you will have tens of thousands of enemies, and that's what I've devoted my life to. It's not my cause, but as I preach against feminism and these kinds of things, I have made Actually, instead of tens of thousands, I've made hundreds of thousands of women cry. I'm not trying to. It's not my goal, but my dad was right. It is powerful because the white knights immediately come to their aid. Yep. So all that being said, Sean Strickland, he's a UFC or what is it?
Yes.
UFC fighter, and he's doing this speech, and a libtard journalist, is like, well, what do you think about, minorities and women and transgender? And he's like, shut up. And he uses, lots of cursing. So I don't endorse the language, but he uses lots of, but then the big thing is, like, later in a press conference, he's given a speech, and the crowd is out there in front of him, and he says, I'm not doing this for me. I do it for you. You're beaten down. And what shocked me is you just hear this roar of this manly massive, and they're like, yeah. And I just thought, this isn't just a bunch of guys who, I'm sure some of these guys are degenerates, but it's not just degeneracy, like, yeah, a fighter who's going to be it. No. It's guys who have been told for decades that they're the scum of the earth, that they're hated, that this country is not for them, that the church is not for them, that Jesus is not for for them, that nothing is for them, that they're the problem and the source of the problem of everything. And a guy stands up for them. That's all it takes. Just a guy. So whether it's Abbott, standing up at our border and saying, I care about your children, and I'm not going to let an invasion of 6 million more illegal immigrants, military age fighting men come into the country and endanger your own posterity. So whether it's Biden at the border, or whether it's Sean Strickland, at a UFC, after match speech, that is the thing. Trump. Or Donald Trump, the rise of Donald Trump. That's what it is. That's what it is. We've had enough. We've had enough. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. For those of you who want to know how to follow us, it's very simple. This is what we do. It's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So we have 3 shows a week, and we air them live at 4 p.m. Central Time on Monday, 4 p.m. Wednesday, 4 p.m. Friday. So 3 shows a week, 4 p.m. Central Time for all those days. And it's live on YouTube and also on Twitter. So you can watch us live on YouTube or on Twitter. After the show's done, it hops up on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and it'll be on rightresponseministries.com, our website. We have a free app. If you want to go to your favorite app store and download the Right Response app, you can listen and watch all of our content there. It's for free. So that's all you have to do is just tune in live at 4 p.m. We try to engage with some of the comments. If you have questions or if you make a good point, give you a shout out. So that's 4 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Monday is Theology Applied, where I have a remote interview with somebody. We pipe them in, and I do, guys that you'll probably recognize, guys like Doug Wilson or guys like Jeff Durbin or guys like Andrew Isker or whatever. And then on Friday is the Friday special. It's in-house in the studio where I fly in notable guys and we do an in-depth dive, like 9 or 10 episodes in a row on a particular topic. Right now, the Friday special, we're heading up to episode 4 this week, and it's with A.D. Robles and Andrew Isker on the Boniface option, how to chop down trash world and rebuild Christendom in its place. But Wednesdays, it's always going to be with Michael Belch and Wesley Todd at a local level, members in our church, and dealing with news, culture, theology. And it's 4 p.m. Central Time on Wednesdays, and that's the live stream. The other things are pre-recorded, but this is the live stream, 4 p.m. on Wednesday. So tune in every Wednesday, 4 p.m. Also Mondays, check out Theology Applied. Also Fridays, check out the Friday special. And tune in like 45 seconds when we fire back up to talk about the whole low T pastors, Alistair Begg, what's going on there, and the phenomenon that is Donald Trump.